How did you get to New York City?
Well, I was actually born in New York City.
Really?
Yeah, I was actually born in New York City. And my parents lived here during the 80s. My dad is a painter. He's an abstract artist. And my mom worked in the arts. She worked for the New York City Ballet and for the New York Public Art Fund. And yeah, but they're both Southern. So they were living here. They lived in Williamsburg in the late 80s. It was a much different place. And when I was 1.5, they moved back to Memphis. And so I don't remember being here, obviously, but I always heard and knew that I was born here. And I always wanted to come back for some reason. And I loved growing up in the South, obviously, but for some reason I was just kind of obsessed with New York. And we would visit, once every 3 or 4 years. My parents still had a lot of friends here. They would come here for the art. And so we would visit, and I would just, be enthralled with the energy and also the history of New York. I read a lot of history books about New York. And I had, New York postcards on my wall. And so I really wanted to come here for college and applied to NYU and got in. So I came when I was 18 and went to Tisch, went to the film school and loved it. I don't know. I met some of, incredible teachers who I'm still, in touch with and collaborating with. Sam Pollard, he is an EP on Natchez, and he was a EP on my first film, Wrestle, and he's been this incredible mentor and supporter throughout my career. So yeah, I loved film school. It was just so fun to be able to make movies, and I focused mainly on documentary and editing. I took the bare minimum of the fiction requirements, script writing, TV. I don't even think I did a TV class, but lighting. I mean, it's all helpful, but I was just let me just take the documentary classes and the editing classes. And yeah, that's what I focused on. And that's what I did. Yeah. And so I've stayed in New York, since graduating, and yeah, almost been here 20 years.
Was New York always, or at least at the beginning, was it what you hoped it would be?
Definitely. Yeah. I think it changes I think my relationship with New York has changed, throughout the different stages of my life. In college, it was my campus, it was the playground. It was, I lived, my freshman year on Washington Square Park. That is pretty crazy. That's, a once in a lifetime thing. And then, I started working in documentary, which is not, a high salary, job. So of course I had to make ends meet through that and move to Brooklyn, which is just amazing. Love Brooklyn, the space, the trees, the Prospect Park, So I feel like it changes, and now I have a baby, so New York is different in that way. It's seeing the city through a child's eyes. We do obviously much different things now. I'm not going out. Going to a movie and dinner is, a big, not undertaking, but, it takes planning and sacrifice. And but yeah, so New York is always changing, and I feel like that's kind of the beauty of it in a lot of ways.
Have you always gravitated towards documentary films? When you think back on your time in Memphis before you came to New York, was that always an interest of yours?
Yes. So growing up, we did not have cable. So much to my sister and I's chagrin and protest, but we never had cable. And so we watched a lot of PBS. And I mean, that was like, I think we watched PBS and Oprah. Yeah. And The Price is Right during the summer. But yeah, so I saw on PBS all these documentaries that I think they were mostly like Frontline types or Ken Burns. And I realized at some point that I could be involved in those somehow. And I think maybe because I grew up with parents who still are, their own bosses and forging their own way in the arts, I could like imagine a life that in the arts. And I was always also a very like academic person in terms of like my parents never had to tell me to do my homework. Yeah, I was always doing my work and like really into history. And I did, I had this teacher, Mr. Thames, in middle school and in high school. He like kind of changed schools with our grade and like went up with us. He was also my soccer coach. And he brought to the school Facing History and Ourselves, which is this curriculum that is incredible. And it basically teaches, I would say, they use the Holocaust as a learning tool as to like teach about different genocides throughout history in a way, and they teach it in a way that's like, how does it relate to us today? How does history relate to the present? And it was extremely eye-opening. Like we did a whole unit, like 6 weeks, on these kids in Chicago who grew up in a low-income neighborhood, and they did their own podcast for like a year. Not podcast, because that wasn't a thing in the 2000s. So they did their own like audio recordings for a year, and we listened to those recordings. We did a whole unit on apartheid in South Africa, a whole unit on not the civil rights movement, but like basically Jim Crow. And then read like Warriors Don't Cry. And, it was just like this really incredible class. It wasn't even a class. It was like I don't know the right word, but it was many years of learning that way. And this was in like a public school in the middle of Memphis at Central High School. And that, I think, really shaped my understanding of the world, and also like realizing that I could kind of create not content, but create art around these subjects. So eventually at NYU, I did like a minor in social and cultural analysis, which informed a lot of my work. But anyways, back to your original question, I think that I like kind of combine my love for social analysis with art and visuals, which I'm a very visual person, and creative person in that way. So like kind of combining those two is where my passion kind of meets.
You mentioned history a few times there. Is there something about, and I'm biased because I love documentary films, but do you think there's something about documentary films themselves that can uniquely, if done well, present history in a compelling, thought-provoking, resonating way? I guess this is more trying to get at your own drive towards doing this kind of work in the first place. But how do you think about the power of a documentary film, especially a great one, to inform people about history, to change minds, or just enlighten people about history, society in general?
Yeah, I think that the documentary medium is really powerful in that respect. I mean, take the impetus for Natchez, for example. Gone with the Wind is not a documentary, but it is it is a film that has had like such an incredible and detrimental effect on our society. Like, it's still considered the highest grossing film of all time, adjusted for inflation. And the way it romanticized the antebellum days and the Civil War really, really impacted dominant culture in this country. And like glorifying the Old South. And I think that it just shows the power of cinema, the power that cinema has over hearts and minds. And for Natchez, I wanted to kind of make an antidote to that and to peel away the layers of the mythology. And I definitely don't think Natchez will ever reach the basically millions and millions of people that Gone with the Wind reached, but I think it will, and still reaches, but I think it will chip away at that, and I hope it will. And I hope that it will, expand people's minds and, expose people to a history that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise learned in school or learned in popular culture or even now, like learning at public sites. A lot of public historic sites don't tell like a honest full history, and I think that a film like Natchez might shift that a bit. It's my hope.
I remember watching Gone with the Wind as a kid multiple times.
Yeah.
And I don't know how recently you've seen it, but what do you think are the misrepresentations, the big ones that permeated the culture in general?
Yeah, I saw it. It's been a few years since I last saw it, but definitely the way that the film portrays the enslaved people is really, really offensive. And
I kind of forget. Can you remind me how they are portrayed?
Like, they're portrayed as not really intelligent and like just following the scarlet or the people. They're enslavers, not having any agency, being called servants, which is not true to the reality of their situation. And the film also glorifies the Confederacy in a way that, these were people who were fighting a war to uphold white supremacy, and continue enslaving people. So I think that the film needs like historical context when watched. And HBO, it's on HBO, and they do have, and on Turner Classics, I think both streamers, I guess you call them, or companies, have like a person at the beginning, a historian at the beginning, talking about the historical context of the film, and they speak much more eloquently about it. But yeah, what was I going to say about? Anyways, yeah, it will come to me.
Is it also true that the enslaved are personality-wise often shown in that film as being cheerful?
Yes,
and almost
exactly.
grateful?
Yeah. The paternalism is like dripping and Gone with the Wind. This idea that enslaved people should be grateful and subservient is just so detrimental to like society and the reality of enslavement. And it's just so disrespectful on so many ways and on so many levels. And it makes, it's done to make white people feel feel comfortable and better about our past. And yeah, it's not good.
That was going to be my next question, which is why that movie came out in the 30s.
Yeah, 39. Yeah,
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain the rationale for whitewashing so many of those details? I think it's pretty obvious that if you want to have mass appeal to the public, showing a roots level gruesomeness about the reality of what happened is not going to make for a blockbuster, most likely.
Right.
How else do you explain? I don't even know if you agree with that sentiment, but
well, I think and there are lots of historians and people who can talk better on this or more informed, but I think that America in general has a really hard time acknowledging, the slavery and the sins of our past, and we're living in a world that history is being silenced, and by the current administration, there's an executive order that they're informing institutions and the National Park Service that they need to restore truth and sanity to truth and sanity to history. And there's also people. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
Well, I want to add as we're talking about this, I was recently watching a conversation about John Brown, in Harper's Ferry Raid, and I remember the one of the commentators basically saying that a lot of his impetus for doing that was to liberate Black people, but also to help to liberate the enslavers because of how corrupting that institution generally was for all of them.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, okay, so your question was the impetus of this. I mean, I think I guess the powers that be, dominant culture, they wanted to mask the horrors of slavery, and because why would they want to face it and atone from it? And it's an affront to people's identity and to what people fought for, or they feel that they fought for. They feel that they are owed this status in life, and owning up to the atrocities of not just slavery, but Jim Crow, the terror that reigned for almost 100 years after the Civil War. That is admitting to that people don't want to admit to that, and feel that they have to give up something. And I think that popular culture is played into that. And with Gone with the Wind, it was the glorification of of the Civil War was a way to just further cement that we don't have this ugly past. And it's continuing today with the current administration saying that, we can only have stories that are of success and inspiration, and that, there's history is literally being hidden from the National Park Service websites, from, institutions. The NEA apparently can't support projects that question American exceptionalism and basically question the patriot myth and the glory of the founding fathers. So,
I mean, you're of the South. You're probably to some people a bit of a heretic with this film, which I want to get into here shortly. What, in your experience growing up there, what was the popular zeitgeist as it pertains to the subjects you cover in your movie? Was it much more in line with the Gone with the Wind narrative for most people? I don't know how much you remember about that.
For me, I grew up in a very artistic community.
No cable.
Yeah. We were surrounded by artists and musicians. So I wasn't really a part of like the cotillion world. My mom grew up in Arkansas. My dad grew up in North Carolina and is definitely from that world. But like in Memphis, he was more building a community of artists with my mother. And so we weren't like, we didn't go to the country clubs. But when I would go visit my grandparents in North Carolina, we would go to country clubs. So I kind of had like this dual view of, and you went to Duke, so you're very much aware of like that culture. And that's what my dad grew up in for sure. And we got taste of it, every summer and every Christmas. But other than that, I was very much like in my little midtown Memphis world, going to Snowden and Central, very inner city public schools, and they were incredible schools. But yeah, I wasn't in those spaces as much as
What did you notice in the Southern country club culture, if anything?
They were very white, very lots of golf. Yeah. Very proper. I don't think I questioned it that much growing up. It was more like, oh, this is like fancy, and we were at in this beautiful place in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was really fun. So I didn't, it was like, in the mountains, the golf course, the whole 9 yards. And at the time, I don't think I ever like questioned like the privilege of it all. And I didn't really, the impetus for Natchez was when I was invited to a wedding on a plantation. And I didn't, before that was in 2017-ish. And like, I had never even heard of people getting married on plantations because, I just never had anyone do that. So I was really surprised that it was a thing. And I started Googling it and reading about it. And the minute I saw the images of like, it's beautiful with the Spanish moss and the bridal parties in front of these big, beautiful homes, I like immediately recognized like pockets of my life in those images. It wasn't like really particularly like how I grew up, but I like understood. And I wanted to question that then. And I thought that that would be like a film would be a way to explore these themes and also kind of like show a different perspective of like of these sites, and to maybe like open some people's minds about like the realities of the history of these places that like had been romanticized to a point that they weren't even seen as prison labor camps, And I think that, American society has done a really good job of like maintaining that mask over the last 100 or 150 years. And yeah. Anyway. You're good. We can pause.
She's got it, and she's in great hands.
Yeah.
We'll see about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a good work meeting.
No worries.
Bye,
Nice to meet you.
So nice to meet
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
I'm excited to listen.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
See you later.
Bye.
How did you find out about Natchez, Mississippi in the first place? There are tons of places in the South you could have focused on. How did you find out about that town and why that specific area?
Yeah, so when I first started this film, I knew I needed to go explore the South and plantations and historic sites. So my mom and I went on a road trip from Memphis to New Orleans. And we went, first of all, we started by just like calling all our friends in the Mississippi Delta. And my parents have a lot of people in Mississippi, and they were so great. And I know a lot of them, and we would just like meet them for dinner. And then they would say, you need to talk to this person and this person. And a lot of people were pointing me to Natchez.
Really?
Yeah. Because Natchez is such a unique place. It has like tons of antebellum homes and structures that were all saved. They did not. So basically, a lot of Mississippi, there's not a lot of plantations in Mississippi because everyone was in the Confederacy. And so, except for Natchez, except for Adams County. And this is because by the 1860s, a lot of Northerners had come down to Mississippi and to Louisiana and had, rich Northerners had bought up plantations, and they were basically they were like diversifying their investments. They were bankers and doctors up north, but they wanted to make more money. So they bought up plantations, and and then Natchez was actually like kind of like the town where you did all your business and your socializing. And so in Natchez, there are no plantations. There are antebellum homes and estates where the families would live and the kids would go to school. And it's where it was basically like the Hamptons or, Martha's Vineyard. It was the place where you went to get seen and do your business. So a lot of Northerners saw the writing on the wall when the Civil War started and were like, oh no, we have investments up north. We know how we want to protect those, and we are not voting to secede. So Adams County was immediately, this is not in the film because it's just too detailed, and there's just so much that could have been in the film historically, but it's fascinating. So the Union Army came in and they set up shop in Natchez, and that's where they did all their business. And only one big estate was destroyed. And apparently there's like a lot of different rumors about why that was. One is that it's called Clifton, and it was a huge house on the river, on the bluff. And the Union Army did bomb it. And there's lots of different stories as to why that was. I think he pissed off a general or didn't invite someone to a party.
Something petty.
Yeah, something petty apparently. So anyways, but the houses were used as where they a hospital or where they did their telegramming or where the general stayed, and that is why Natchez is so preserved.
With no resistance.
Exactly. There was no resistance, but there are not a lot of plantations left standing in Mississippi because so many were burned during the war. And Natchez is, as they say, this tiny little jewel box. And and that's why. So basically what happened was our friends said you should talk to these people in Natchez, and Natchez is where you need to go. And so I went and I talked to some people, and I think I had been reading so much about slavery and the antebellum period that when I went to Natchez, all I could see was the horror and the beauty mixed together. And it was really unsettling to me because I was like, this is so beautiful, but oh my gosh, it was all built on such pain and suffering, and like there's no acknowledgement of that anywhere. And that freaked me out. And I was just like, I need to leave. And I remember telling my mom, like, let's go to New Orleans. Like, let's get out of here.
It was too affecting.
It was too affecting. Yeah, it was really visceral. And years later, I realized, and, you know, the pandemic happened. So everything was put on pause. And I realized a couple years later that like, oh, I need to lean into that tension and I need to confront that. I don't need to run away from it. That's what I need to explore in a film. And I need to face it as a white person and as a white Southerner. I need to dismantle it all in a way. And so yeah, I returned to Natchez once in 2022 and started talking to people again. And I went to some cocktail parties, and that's where I met Tracy, who's one of the main characters in the film. And I went to the visitor center to just get brochures and see the different tours. And Rev recruited me onto his van. Yeah, and that was mind blowing. I had no idea just what I was getting into and just how incredible his tour was. And I immediately knew oh wow, if I would be so lucky to be able to film with Rev, this would he could be his own film, honestly. So that's how it all started. And then everyone in Natchez is just so warm and welcoming. And people would say oh, talk to this person, or have you talked to this person? Let me set you up with this person. So I just had this amazing web of people, and too many people. I didn't even get to talk to everyone I wanted to talk to, or even meet. And yeah, and that's just kind of how it grew. Yeah.
At some point, do you basically move your life down there? And just logistically, for people that are interested in how documentary films are made, including myself, how do you begin that process of actually starting something that ends up becoming a feature film?
So I think if I or anyone knew the amount of work, or
you'd never start.
Yeah. It's and that's for so many things.
It's
but
so true.
Yeah, I think for a documentary there is so many different phases and stages of the process, which is actually what I love. That it's constantly changing. It's using so many different parts of your brain at different times and at the same time. And so you just honestly, you have to take it day by day, or else you will drown under the thought of it all. And so I guess, for me, for this film, I started with reading and watching a lot. And I started with a lot of audio interviews with people in academics. So professors in geography, for instance, who study how places affect society and how people's interaction with historic sites, plantations, for example, how that affects an experience or affects a community. And so I talked with a lot of different people in the academic world. And then I started talking to people at historic sites. So, and I would just do audio phone calls and interviews. And so then I went to the places, and then, all without a camera. And then I interviewed them again, kind of like what we're doing here. Yeah. And I would take photos and started to develop a visual and audio kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but
a sense of the place.
Yeah. Thank you. And eventually then I was like, I really need to shoot, because it's really hard to raise money for a project without having something super visual to like with your main participants. It's really hard to raise money without that. It's just a fact. And even though I had made a film before, a feature film that had done really well and gotten, you know, tons of awards, it's just too much of a risk, I guess, for institutions and for people, you know, with the funds to support the arts. They really need to see the vision, I think. And I think that's also a barrier in a lot of ways. And there are some grants that do support, you know, like basically they call it like a development sizzle or a development reel. Just they do support funding those things, but they're very few and far between. Catapult Film Fund is one of them, and they supported us. And yeah, they're doing the hard work, but like kind of alone. And so yeah, I basically, my producer Darcy McKinnon, she's based in New Orleans. She's an incredible producer. We've been working on this film together since 2021, and we put together our resources. You know, she has a camera, and we invested in ourselves basically and paid for a 10-day shoot. And we brought on Noah Collier, who is our cinematographer. And we did, 10 days in Natchez, and we're able to capture a lot. Yeah,
independently. So that's you're
totally
bootstrapping this.
Independently. Yeah, like money I had saved over the pandemic, actually. I had saved some money. I also edit. So, we just went down and did it really bare bones. Like I did the sound. I lopped people up. But a lot of that footage is in the film, a lot of it. And eventually, so then I can edit. So I edited, after those 10 days, I edited a sample. I did like a 15-minute sample that kind of showed more of the story arc and like the various characters, Rev, Debbie, Tracy, and David, and Kathleen, the head of the Park Service. They were all in that initial sample, and they're the main people in the film. So it was it was like our first shoot for sure. And then I did like a 4.5-minute sizzle that was more sizzly. And then we used that to pitch and to raise money. And we applied to ITVS, which is part of PBS. They have an open call where they you submit, and then they select around like 10 films a cycle, I think, to become broadcast partners on. So they basically license your film, and they support it about, you know, they give a big chunk of funding to you to help you make the film. And they're partners in that sense, but not editorially, which is incredible. So you still have like final cut and independent. You're still making an independent film. But then you will, and it's like with the promise that you will be on public television in some capacity, which is really cool. And so we got that, and
you got that.
Yes. And then we also brought on an executive producer, Cindy Meal, who is from Jackson, Mississippi, and grew up going to pilgrimage, which pilgrimage is this time of year, twice a year in Natchez, where the antebellum homeowners open up their homes to the public and give tours of like anywhere from 20 to 40 homes are open for public tours. And it's during the spring when all the azaleas are in bloom. And they also now have a fall pilgrimage. But yeah, so Cindy during the 60s grew up going to this, and she was, she was really taken with the initial shoot we had and what we were trying to do with the film. So she came on and was an incredible supporter. And so once Cindy came on, we were able to shoot for 6 weeks during spring pilgrimage in 2023. So we started shooting in 2022, and then in 2023, I did move, I guess, to Natchez for 6 weeks, almost, a little more even. And we had like an Airbnb type situation, and Noah and the cinematographer and our sound engineer, we had two, Brian Fish and Sean O'Neill. They came at different times, but we all lived in the house together. And Darcy would come up from New Orleans and like bring us supplies and like wine, like nice organic wine, and like do a Whole Foods run. And that was great. But yeah, we shot pretty much every day straight. We would take like half days off, but there's just so much to capture. And then I didn't right. And so then we came back every couple of months. So we came back in June. That was in March and April. We came back in June. We came back in August. Came back in October for fall pilgrimage. And then that was pretty much the bulk of production. And then we started the edit like in January of 2024. And then we did our final shoot in June of 2024, which we had been in the edit for many months. So I knew like exactly what we needed to like fill the gaps in the narrative arc. And we had our final shoot at, which I knew was going to be the ending of the film probably, was the Luminaries at Melrose, which is a National Park Service site where they honor the 700 enslaved individuals who were owned by the family that owned Melrose. So anyways, you'll see in the film, it's a very beautiful remembrance. And yeah, so that was basically how the production went. And each time we would go never again for like 6 weeks, but because that was, it was great and so essential to my filmmaking process, because we really needed to kind of really get to know everyone, and you can't know people and know a community in a week or two. You gotta kind of get in there. And it got to the point, Natchez is such a beautiful, like, everyone, just people know each other, and it's a small place. It's so great in terms of like filming, because everything is 3 minutes away. So we could like film we could film 3 different things in one day, because everything is so close together. But it got to the point where like everyone knew who we were, and like, they would wave, and we would always be around town out and about, and you just get to know people that way and see people. And that was really nice. Like I loved the small town reality of Natchez. It was,
You were talking earlier about how the truth of the history of the South is so rarely recognized. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like that was my interpretation generally of what you were alluding to related to Gone with the Wind and just the general story that's told in the South or in the country about the South. I have always looked to how my understanding of how the Germans now face what happened there. And it's a requirement, as far as less I knew, for school children to go to concentration camps and to see that, to learn about that, to look that in the eye. I've never heard of anything like that on a widespread level happening in the South about what happened there. Obviously, it's longer ago, but Jim Crow wasn't that long ago, to your point. What are the truths that you feel like you may have been able to nail in this movie that are not often told in Gone with the Wind, but other stories about the antebellum South that you're proud of, that you think are worth a conversation. I remember in the Q&A, people bringing this up to you when you were talking about the movie when it was over.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the film through Rev and through the National Park Service in Natchez, through Barney, a park ranger there, through Debbie, who owns Concord Quarters, a slave quarter in Natchez, they are telling a history that hasn't gotten much support or recognition, and they're telling a history about that challenges, like what Rev says, like challenges Southern pride narratives with truths and facts. And I think that the film highlights that, Reconstruction and all the progress that was made in the country and in Natchez, in Black representation, and then how there was a huge, terrible backlash, and that's Jim Crow. And
sorry to interrupt. Am I right that Rev in the movie notes that some of the first high-ranking Black members of the government and judges, I forget all the
Congress people
were from there.
We're from Natchez, Hiram Revels, John R. Lynch. They were both Natchezians that rose to the ranks in Congress, but during Reconstruction. But then once the Mississippi Plan got in place, which turned into Jim Crow, all of that was struck down, and people lost, voting rights, representation, and then, it became a felony to, became a felony for Black people to just live life, and segregation occurred. So I think that the film really, really highlights those parts of our history that don't get talked about enough. And like you were saying about Germany, people, I think the country, like the powers that be in Germany, have made it a requirement. And in this country, we have not done that ever. And I think that we cannot, as a country, move on, or not even move on is the right word, but until we face it, the problems are still going to exist. The inequalities, the racism, the classism, it's all going to still exist until we really face it. And you kind of need the federal government, I think. I don't know. You need guidance, I think. Like in Germany, how they've made it a requirement. And we definitely don't have that right now. We have the opposite of that right now. Like I mentioned earlier. So I think we're so far from that in this moment, but there are still people on the ground, public historians doing the daily work. Most Americans, I feel like, get their history through living in the real world, going to museums, going to sites, watching documentaries. A lot of people aren't, they're not going to class anymore. And so a lot of history and a lot of history is told through living history. And I think it is so important that people like Rev are supported and given economic resources to do the work. I think that's another thing that has been really missing, in this country, because, for example, there are 400 active public, I guess we'd say there are 400 plantations in this country right now that are public facing sites of like that give tours, or like that they're a bed and breakfast or an event space. And there are 400 plantations that are open to the public right now. And only like, I would say 5 are telling the story, the full stories of the enslaved. And, you know, if we were in Germany, that it would probably look a lot different.
Are there other films or documentaries like yours that you point to as being more representative of the truth of the history there that you've seen or know about that you would point people to, or books, I suppose, as well?
I don't feel like Natchez, like my film, is like the truth, you know? I kind of don't think that. I think that's a dangerous word, actually. I think that the film shows a history that has been hidden, and has been purposefully hidden and like pushed down, and now, and throughout history, people have been pushing against that, right? And I think that the film just like highlights the importance of telling a more complete history of our country, not just of the South, but of the country. And I don't think that there's one film or one book that encapsulates it all. And ours certainly doesn't. So yeah, anyways, but I would say that some films that were really influential to me in making before I made this film were Margaret Brown's Order of Myths. It's Margaret Brown is from Mobile, Alabama, and she made a film about the 2 Mardi Gras that happened. I don't know if it still happens. This was in the early 2000s, but a black and white Mardi Gras, and the different like kind of balls around those for 20 people in their 20s. And it's a fascinating look at the segregation of it all and the different histories that are told, and in Mobile specifically. And let me think of other films. Darcy McKinnon, my producer, one of her films that CJ Hunt directed, called The Neutral Ground. It's about the Confederate monuments coming down in New Orleans, and it uses humor in a really effective way of, you know, kind of questioning all of that, and like documenting also like the actual monuments in New Orleans coming down. And they go into, it has like a lot more of like a traditional historical explanation of how the Southern mythology was like born out of, you know, the daughters of the Confederacy, how they worked like super hard to get the Lost Cause narrative into textbooks and to really get it into schools, and cemented that in like white dominant culture. And
what is the Lost Cause narrative?
Oh, the Lost Cause narrative is, I probably should have mentioned this like earlier when we were talking about Gone with the Wind, but it's basically the mythologizing of and glorification of antebellum times, and of like what people, the Confederacy was fighting for, kind of saying that they weren't fighting for upholding enslavement, but instead fighting for a state's rights. And kind of like, yeah, it's just like
a Disney story.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
A fairy tale.
A rewriting of history, really. Yeah. And so a lot of the tours, the antebellum home tours in Natchez, are like under the guise of like this Lost Cause narrative, perpetuating that slaves were happy and we were doing them favors, and like, you know, there was affection between the owner and the slave, and they would be, where would they be without the owner? You know, like they're getting, you know, all this crazy bullshit. So yeah, it's all wrapped up in the lost cause narrative.
Well, I loved it. I think I speak for a lot of people in saying that. I hope a lot of people see it because it was very affecting. I think of all the movies I saw at that film festival, that's the one that will probably stay with me most.
Oh, thank you.
I would love to close with asking you, if you had an unlimited budget for your career, what are the stories, what are the additional stories that you think are worthy of a full-length documentary that you would love to see told, or you would like to tell yourself? I'd love to hear that. What isn't being talked about or shown that should be?
I think, well, for me personally, I only want to tell Southern stories. And I think that comes from a lot of different things. I think that the South is mischaracterized a lot and not understood. And I want to like give a voice and a platform to the people I know and love and grew up with. And so that is really my passion. And I like want to make the South like it's such a beautiful, complicated place. I like just want to add to that and to understand it. I want to help other people understand it. And I want to help Southerners understand it all, because it's hard. It's hard to work through. And so, my idea would be just to tell stories in the South and to give other Southern filmmakers that opportunity as well. Because there's not a ton of resources anywhere for the arts, and it's getting harder and harder daily. But specifically, I don't know.
Maybe I can add one additional question onto this, which is like related. I've spent some of my life in the South, not as deep in the South as you were raised in, but do you think typically for most people, the misunderstanding about the past is truly malicious intentionally or just ignorance? Where do you come down on that, given what you just said about how lovely it sounds like so many of the people were that you grew up with?
Right.
That they're just misinformed, or that there's something willfully malignant about the prevailing mindset about the history?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's willful malice or ill intent. I think that it's privilege. I think it's cognitive dissonance. Like a lot of the times, I think it's people are product of the society and the culture around them that has done such a good job of masking the full history. Because that maintains white supremacy, and I think that I think people maybe just like choose not to think about it. And this film, I hope, will, and it's not just Southerners. I think it's all Americans. A lot of people are complicit in not wanting to face these realities because then you have to like question what you have, and I hope that the film makes people think about that, their own complicities and maintaining, segregation and inequality in a lot of ways. But I don't think it's like, sometimes it is, but For most people.
Not the majority of the time.
Not the majority of the time, for sure. Not. Yeah.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you.